Here's the other team. Well, actually, one of many teams in the AFC North, pretty much all of them, that can frustrate the fuck out of their fans. The Cincinnati Bengals. Okay. And I'm gonna zoom out a little bit here. Okay. In 2021, when Joe Burrow took a 4-win team from 2020 and played him into the Super Bowl, if somebody told you, Bengals fan, that they would miss the playoffs 2 of the next 3 years, what would you think? You would think, oh, Joe Burrow got hurt again. Like, because in the modern NFL, like, there are guys like Lamar who haven't won in the playoffs, but they're in the playoffs every year. You know, the best quarterbacks in the NFL generally go to the playoffs. The fact that Joe Burrow, who should be like the face of the NFL or a face of the NFL, and he is. I mean, the Netflix documentary, the whole thing. He's driving around a Batmobile. He's dating celebrities. Like he should be K-pop famous, dude. Joe Burrow should be like a global icon. That's how good he is at quarterback, and that's how cool he is. But instead, he's sitting on the same fucking couch I am in January, like annually now, 2 years in a row. Sitting in the same spot as you in January. I can't think of I'm not an NBA fan like that anymore. But like, and it's not the City Edition jerseys. It's just there's too much basketball. I don't know who it would be like missing the playoffs. Would it be like Giannis not being in the playoffs? Like, I'm not really sure. But it'd be like one of the best players on the planet not being in the playoffs every year, which is bad for the league, and it's also confounding. Like, it's totally fucking confounding. Listen, 21, they're right there. They can't beat the Rams. 22, they're right there. I think 22, I thought they had the Chiefs in 22. They did have the Chiefs, but that Osai penalty. So they've been so close. And otherwise, they've been at home in January. That is wild shit to me. And so bear with me here. Remember the Drew Brees era in New Orleans? Huge success, right? Hall of Fame quarterback, won a Super Bowl, just monster numbers every year. And he didn't have Jamar Chase. He didn't have Tee Higgins. He had Jimmy Graham, he had Colston, he had, some weapons, dude, but he didn't have these guys. This show is a lot of fun to watch. But imagine in 2009, let's say they don't win that game in the Super Bowl. Let's say they don't recover the onside kick. And you look back at Drew Brees, Hall of Fame quarterback, like monster numbers, threw for 50 miles. Like, you're going to tell me he didn't win a Super Bowl? You wasted that. Well, obviously he won a Super Bowl. We're not doing revisionist history, but I would liken where Burrow's tenure in Cincinnati's headed to an alternate universe where Brees doesn't win a Super Bowl. And I'm saying that because of the lows. In today's NFL, if you have a top 3-5 quarterback and he's not in the playoffs, there's something wrong organizationally. And I think New Orleans at times skated on the fact that thank God they won that Super Bowl, at the turn of the decade there, because they were 7-9 like 6 times.
Yeah.
6 times?
5 times, yeah.
5 times. 7-9, 5 times. They had Drew Brees at quarterback and were home in the playoffs 5 times. And there were good quarterbacks in the NFC, but it wasn't like being in the AFC. So, like, you actually had an opportunity to really make runs with that quarterback, and he was sitting on the couch in January that many times. And every time, pretty much, I went back and looked, it was a defense. Defense being a bottom 5-10 unit, dude, like some years last. And that to me is just, it's a waste of elite quarterbacking years, dude. And Burrow's going through the same thing. Now, when the Saints had good defenses, when Greg Williams in 2009 elevated that defense and they became like a top 5 unit, they went to Super Bowl, they won it. When they were good in 18, when they were on the doorstep, they had a really good defense. In 13, they had a top 5 defense to go to the playoffs. But there were a lot of years the Saints didn't make the playoffs. And so I look at the Bengals and I'm like, bro, like you're flirting with that without the ring. And that would be a disappointment of epic proportions. Like, if they don't make the playoffs this year, I feel like they kind of owe it to the talent around with Joe Burrow and the talent around him to make a change at head coach. And I'm not saying Zac Taylor's a bad coach, and I'm not even calling him Marvin Lewis, who was there almost 2 decades and never won a playoff game. Okay, he didn't have Joe Burrow, though. They have to realize the gravity of this situation. Like 16, 17, 18, Marvin Lewis, I believe, didn't go to the playoffs, and that was it. And that wasn't even the first 3-year run without a playoff appearance, but I think enough was enough. Like, you have to realize the gravity of the situation. This guy threw for 40 touchdowns last year and like 7 picks. He was a fucking machine with no O-line. You talk about his offensive line since he's been there. I mean, it's so funny because like it's not funny. He got his knee snapped damn near in half the first year he played. And the next year they go to the draft and they're like, you know what? We'll take Jamar Chase. And everybody's like, did you see Penei Sewell was there? And everybody's like, you're trying to kill your quarterback. And it's one of those things like, are you sure you want to do that? It's like when a drunk guy does something like kind of impressive. He's like, I can do it. I can walk on the edge or whatever. And the motherfucker goes up there and tight ropes the edge of the wall or whatever it is. And everybody's like, man, that was cool, but like probably not advisable. That was kind of the feeling I got when they made the Jamar Chase thing work and Joe didn't get like broken in half over the next couple of years. Like, although he was close at times, you're like, yeah, it worked, but I wouldn't do it again. I'm not second guessing Jamar Chase, the best fucking receiver in football, according to a lot of people. But what I am saying is like that philosophical decision is kind of emblematic of how they've treated the offensive line. I'm not saying I'd have done things differently, but they have completely whiffed on a lot of the offensive line decisions. And at times they just haven't poured into it. And here we are, like, I think they've had a kind of a bottom 10 offensive line for most of, if not all of his career. And that's not even really the thing that sank him. The point I'm making is the defenses are what's going to probably ultimately be the thing you look back and say, like, you couldn't get a competitive middle of the pack defense to play opposite this fantastic quarterback.
The Bengals are the only offensive line in the NFL to rank 25th or worse in pass block win rate in 4 straight years. 2021, they were 30, 22, they were 30, 2023, they were 27th, and last year they were 32nd.
And I guess it's one of those things where they've decided, like, Joe's that good. We really don't need a great offensive line. And to that I would say eventually you will. But it's pretty wild. Like, just if you could just be middle of the pack defensively and have a decent offensive line, can you imagine what this guy would be able to do? And another thing is we talk about the offensive line typically not being very good, the defense typically not being very good, even though Lou Anarumo was a DC I really liked, and they had bright spots. Like, the problem a lot of times is this team is asleep. This team's sleepwalking in September, dude. Zac Taylor teams are 1-11 in the first 2 weeks of the season. They've been 9-win teams the past 2 years. And in December, we always say this, like, regardless of how bad the defense was last year or the year before or like whatever, you would say, hey, the Bengals are that team that they don't want to see. Like, the teams in the playoffs don't want to see because they have Joe Burrow. And they got the big 3. And it's games like the Patriots mess where, you're like, damn, that game really would have helped. And we could go down the line as we talk about coaching in all the games where I thought that they just situationally and from an execution standpoint down the stretch, they invented new ways to lose games last year. I'm not going to go through it all because I lived it. I had the Bengals over win total ticket. And every year I had Dr. Fax telling me they were cooked, and he really couldn't explain why. for his point to be right, they would have had to invented a brand new way to lose the next week, and they did it all year. And I had to wear it every week. So I've lived this thing. It's almost like I'm a Bengals fan. Okay? Like they have to be better in the beginning of the season because they are going to find ways to fuck up games in the months of October, November, and December. That's just who the Bengals are. This year, you're in a two game season. Browns and Jags out the gate. You got to be 2-0 because the next month you got at Vikings, at Broncos, at Packers with a home game against the Lions in the middle. You got to set that fucking alarm clock, dude. I mean, the alarm clock should be already going off. And you talk about like Joe Burrow in the preseason. He's taken 18 preseason snaps in his career. But that's really not the issue. I don't think it's the preseason snaps. I think it's the reasons he's missing the preseason snaps have held him out of valuable time in camp. Rookie year, there was COVID. 22, he had an appendectomy. 23, he had a calf. Obviously there was the ACL rehab. Like he's just had to deal with a lot in his off seasons. I think it's bled into not necessarily how he's played the position all the time, but like how the offense is operated, especially early in the season. And that's just tough, man, because this is a team that can't afford to drop 2 games in the beginning of the season. So this has to be an inflection point in general for this team this year. You got to start fast. You got to win your division games. And obviously the defense has to get cleaned up. But when you have a defense that's on paper, the roster's not great, it can be one of the hardest things to fix. Like it's just there's nobody coming to the rescue. Once you've drafted your players, once you've made your cuts, if you got a problem, you either got to go find somebody, you got to trade for somebody, or you have to develop the guys on defense. And the guy that's going to save the day this year, or at least I hope, is my old coach Al Golden. He was my coach at Virginia. He used to dog cuss me. I loved Al Golden.